Assalamualaikum and Hai everyone. Today my group will present a topic about preventing and responding to violence. Before we proceed, I would like to introduce my group members. Let's go.
Kau ni kan?
Jangan.
Ada budak bergaduh. Macam kita record. Kasih viral. Cikgu, ada student kena bully. Ha? Kenapa ni?
In this video, we will discuss about the introductions of violence, factors contributing to violence, strategy for preventing violence, responding to violence, and lastly, conclusions. So, let's jump. Hi everyone. So, for introduction, I will explain what violence means, types of violence, and also school violence issues. What is meant by violence? Violence among adolescents is a significant public health issue. The focus was on school-going adolescents because of the lifelong negative impact at an individual level both for the perpetrator and victim. Based on the Cambridge Dictionary, violence means action or words that are intended to hurt people, or extremely forceful actions that are intended to hurt people or are likely to cause damage. On the other hand, violence is defined by the World Health Organizations in the World Report on Violence and Health as the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, another person's, or against a group or community that either result in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation. What is school violence? School violence is all forms of violence that take place in and around schools and is experienced by students and perpetrated by other students, teachers, and other school staff. There are 6 types of violence. The first one is physical violence. Physical violence occurs when someone uses a part of their body or an object to control a person's actions. Secondly, sexual violence. Sexual violence occurs when a person is forced to unwillingly take part in sexual activity. The third one is emotional violence. Emotional violence occurs when someone says or does something to make a person feel stupid or worthless. Next, psychological violence. Psychological violence occurs when someone uses threats and causes fear in an individual to gain control. Spiritual violence. Spiritual or religious violence occurs when someone uses an individual's spiritual belief to manipulate, dominate, or control that person. And lastly, cultural violence. Cultural violence occurs when an individual is harmed as a result of practices that are part of her or his culture, religion, or tradition. There are several issues related to violence in Malaysian schools. School has become the daily scenario of violence incident involving children and young people and even the teachers. We know that violence is a sensitive issue that provokes anxiety. Admitting to the existence of violence in school, traditionally a place of learning and growth, is particularly painful. One of the issues that I want to speak about is a video of a boy being punched by his peers at their hostel that went viral on social media last year, which is early December 2021. At least 8 male students were involved in this incident. Due to the incident, Datuk Sri Sarani Muhammad, who is Menteri Besar Perak, said that individuals who are capable of beating up another person are emotionally unstable. If they are willing to do so, then there is something wrong with the persons. This is because people who were emotionally stable could feel love, fear, and embarrassment and will not beat up another person. Besides, Parents should observe and understand the changes in their children's feelings and behaviors. Teachers and hostel wardens are also responsible for observing changes in students' behavior. Let's move to our next point, which is factors that contributed to violence. At the school level, it was well established that violence or bullying can lead to severe mental and physical consequences on victims. For example, like depression, anxiety, and loneliness. Thus, the factor associated with violence-related behavior should be identified early at school so that early targeted prevention programs can be initiated. So, there are a few factors that contributed to violence, which is individual risk factors, family risk factors, peer and social risk factors, and also community risk factors. Before we go through each factors, I would like to explain about what does it mean to be at risk of violence. What does it mean to be at risk of violence? Risk factors are characteristics that are linked to an increased chance of a person or group being impacted by or perpetrating violence. Risk factor can occur at individual, family, school, and community levels. While not everyone who is identified as being at risk become involved in violence, research shows that those individuals with more than one risk factor and a lack of protective factors are more likely to be impacted by or implicated in violence. As an individual is exposed to more risk factors, the probability that she or he will engage in violent behavior increases. Not to waste our time, let's go one by one the factors that contributing to violence. Firstly, the individual risk factors, such as poor academic performance, unstructured free times, delinquent peers, history of violence victimizations, attention deficits, hyperactivity or learning disorder, history of early aggressive behavior, involvement with drugs, alcohols or tobacco, and exposure to violence. Secondly, family risk factors, such as harsh, lax, or inconsistent disciplinary practices, low parental involvement, low emotional attachment to parents or caregivers, and also low parental education and income. Next, peer and social risk factors, association with delinquent peers, involvement in gangs, social rejection by peers, and also poor academic performance. Lastly, community risk factors, such as high level of family disruptions, low level of community participations, socially disorganized neighborhoods, diminished academic opportunity, community deteriorations, media, guns, alcohol, and other drugs. That's all from me. I will pass to the next presenter, Nisa.
Besides investigating the factor of violence, researchers also discussing the strategies on how to prevent its occurrence. Violence can be prevented, and there are many strategies that has been suggested. Here are 6 strategies, which are: first, build supportive school communities; second, know the early warning signs of potential for violence; third, be observant in unknown spaces; fourth, be attentive to whisper and rumors; fifth, de-escalate potentially explosive situations; and sixth, be alert for the presence of gang activities. Firstly is building a supportive school communities, such as creation of human environment. Making an open communication with the student is an important step to keeping involved in the schoolwork, friends, and activities. By doing this, students are known and feel supported by their teachers, and this will create a trust environment among them. This is because when the school already make it clear about the rules and consistently apply the rules, students will be feel safe, since if they get threatened by some bullies, they know they can rely on the teachers and school system. Next is creating school families. In this institution, teacher will develop and nurture a good relationship with students to get to know about them and show that the teacher care about them. For example, by asking questions and use phrases such as "tell me more" and "what do you think?" Phrases like this show the student that the teacher are listening and always want to hear more about their opinions, ideas, and especially their problem. Second strategy is always be alert to the sign of hate. Hate behavior can be taught as verbal or non-verbal expression of discrimination. For instance, hate speech consists of the verbal or written expression of prejudice that is aimed at harming another group. So, teacher must take note of this message of hate in student book report, essays, or journal entries. If this kind of situation happens, it is compulsory for teacher to report this concern to the principal, school counselor, or the district affirmative action officer. In order to avoid these hate crimes from happening, teachers must help the student recognize hate symbols such as in the literature that is containing derogatory references, which is showing a critical or disrespectful attitude toward any races or ethnicity. In addition, teachers need to discuss with them on how to react with this situation. Other than that, they must be advised not to wear any outfit that involve negative stereotype or promote hate behavior. Next strategy in preventing violence is examining the way of school recognize student achievement. Institutionalized favoritism must be avoided. For example, in some schools, athlete students seem to have the superiority compared to other students. This scenario can be seen as when they did a violence act, such as physically abusing other students, they will not be subjected to any disciplinary action. Instead of to be punished, they were even still allowed to continue participating in their sport. This is because the school was over-glorified the athlete achievement and abandoned the other student. Therefore, to be a good school administration, they need to celebrate students fairly by recognizing the different type of their achievement. Other than school administration, the student also be encouraged to contribute in violence prevention effort. One of activities that can be done by students is organizing the anti-violence event. In this organization, the students will unify among themselves in providing the protection of the school high conflict areas such as hallways, cafeterias, restrooms, and others, as well as contribute in giving the ideas on making the area safer. Thus, they can be the peer mediator for the other students who will be able to acquire the resolution skill in order to deal with the conflict of violence that happen in the school. This peer mediator program definitely can help to reduce the violence incident because it can give more impact to the students since they already earn the respect from their peers. Before the violence in school getting worse, it is important to know the early warning sign of potential for violence to be happen. This is because the potential violent students are typically exhibit multiple warning signs. Thus, this list of early warning signs that I will mention later can be used as a guide so that teachers and school staff can be alert to any situation. Those early warning signs are not an infallible predictor that a student will commit a violence act toward himself or others. However, teachers still need to be careful for not overreacting to the single signs, words, or action because sometimes it is difficult to distinguish between a real threat of violence and a harmless student expression. In addition, teachers also must not be biased by a student's races, socioeconomic status, academic abilities, or physical appearance. Hence, teachers need to learn a proper procedure in reporting any violent cases that happen in the school, such as reporting to the school official, who are principal, counselor, and school nurse, in order to investigate it first, and then get the consent from the student's parents before giving the information to the agency outside the school. So, here are some early warning signs of potential for violence, which are pattern of impulsive and chronic hitting, intimidating and bullying behaviors, history of discipline problems, uncontrolled anger, drugs and alcohol use, inappropriate access to possession of firearms and use of firearms, affiliation with gangs, serious threat of violence, and intolerance for differences and prejudicial attitude. Meanwhile, these are the imminent signs of violence that need to be taken seriously, which are serious physical fighting with peers or family members, severe destruction of properties, severe reach for seemingly minor reasons, other self-injurious behavior, or threat of suicide, a detailed threat of lethal violence which is very harmful, and possession or use of firearms and other weapons. Therefore, in order to be aware of the warning sign of violence, teachers need to be observant in unknown spaces where the violence incidents are most likely to be happen at the spaces, which is stairwells, hallways, locker rooms, and cafeteria. This is because at these places, students are usually hang out with their gangs. While observing the student, the teachers need to make eye contact whenever passing the student. By doing this action, students will be feel that they are always be spied on and will be hesitant to do something wrong, especially violent actions.
Hi, I am Nordayana. I will continue on the strategies for preventing violence. The first strategy is be attentive to whispers and rumors. Usually, the school violence did not happen spontaneously. The attacker will plan the attack before it happens. Normally, there are people who know about the attack in the first place, but some of them are aware of the details of the attack while others are only aware that something bad will occur at the school on the particular day. From the findings, they say that students are scared to tell the teacher as they know about the threats. This is because they are worried that something bad will happen to them. The fifth strategy is de-escalate potentially explosive situation. In the most cases, explosive situations start out well. For example, suppose you ask a student to do a favor, but the student becomes angry. We have no idea what happens before they enter our classroom. The teacher will become angry and upset with the student at some time. In this case, the student-teacher connection will be affected. So, if this situation happens, what can a teacher do to prevent this situation? Firstly, the teacher should have paid attention to the student's irritated face. Face flushing, squinty eyes, clenched fists, tight body posture, pacing and stomping are all signs of potential erratic behavior. Secondly, teacher must speak respectfully by using the student's name to communicate. Bembero and Shakpur 2017 said that a successful educator in the field of teaching should be aware of the power of words and their impact on the audience, and stop from repeating words without consideration on a daily basis. Lastly, if teachers do not corner a student, quarrel, participate in a power struggle, or embarrass the kid in front of others, they can typically avoid difficult situations. The last strategy is be alert for the presence of gang activity. Teachers must be aware of gang involvement in schools, since it is highly connected to prevalence of firearms, drugs, and violence. There are a few signs on how we want to know the gang presence. The first one is gathering or hangout. Members of a gang might establish a territory. Other students will avoid these locations after they have been claimed. Next, they will use non-verbal and verbal signs. Gang members frequently use unique signaling and communication methods to communicate with another. To give a signal, for example, use hand sign. After that, graffiti also can be a sign of gang presence. Graffiti advertise the gang and its members and may contain challenging messages to other gangs, for example, signs, symbols, and nicknames on fabric or walls. Afterwards, gang also can be detected by stance and walk. Each members have different techniques of standing and walking that characterize them, so each of them have their own personality. Lastly is symbols. Symbols that are commonly used by them are belt, shoelaces, caps, and earrings. Teenagers usually run in pairs and attempt to look and act like everyone else, making it difficult to recognize a gang. Gang members will simply use more subtle signs, such as gang team belt buckles or earrings worn with other jewelry. The existence of gang in school may appear to be an issue that a classroom teacher really difficult to handle. The majority of kids join the gang to fulfill unmet demands. So that's all for my part, and I will pass this topic to Fadila.
Hi, my name is Nurul Fadila. For the next subtopic, we are going to learn how to effectively copy with aggressive behavior. And I want you to imagine an accident of aggressive behavior occurring in your classroom. Normally, when we are dealing with something that is beyond our control, we will become angry and aggressive and try to get in the kid's face. One of the important points that we as a future educator must remember is that teachers can't react normally. This is because that will only make things worse, and your responsibility is to make things better. So to make things better, you need to think carefully about what you will do to diffuse the aggressions and protect yourself and your students. So let's consider an episode that occurred in Sandy's classroom. As usual, I was standing at the doorways as the kids were coming into the classroom, and I noticed Robert come in without his backpack or any books. That didn't look right, and I watched him cross the room and go over to Daniel, who was sitting at his desk. So Robert picked up the desk and the leg of his chair and overturned them, cursing and screaming the whole time. So I ran over. The first thing I said was, "Daniel, don't raise your hand." He was on the floor on his back, and Robert was standing over him, screaming. I kept saying, "Robert, look at me, look at me." Finally, he made eye contact. Then I said, "You need to come with me." We began to walk toward the door, but he turned back and started cursing again. Very quietly and firmly, I told him, "You need to come with me." He followed me to the door, and as I reached the door, I picked up the phone and called the office and said there was a problem and to send someone out. Then we stepped out into the hallway. Robert was angry and was going to leave, and I asked him to please stop and talk to me about what was going on, what was bothering him. I didn't yell. I didn't say, "How could you do something so stupid?" Even though that's what I felt like saying. I said, "Obviously you are upset about something, so tell me about it." So it turns out that these two were friends, but Robert found out that Daniel was sleeping with his girlfriend. And I heard a lot about, I didn't really want to hear, but it kept him occupied until the vice principal came out. Once the vice principal took Robert, I got Daniel out into the hallway and asked him if he was okay and if he needed to go to the nurse or needed to be out of the classroom. He said no, he was okay, and I told him, "You were very smart for not raising your hands against Robert." So he returned to his seat, and all the kids started saying, "Daniel, are you okay?" and crowding around him. I told them, "Robert is in the office, Daniel is okay, let's get started on chemistry." At the end of the period, the office called for Daniel to go to the peer mediation room to have the dispute mediated. In addition to going to peer mediation, Robert was suspended for 3 days. But the day he was suspended, he came back after school hours. Something he wasn't supposed to do, to apologize for his language. And I accepted his apology, but I said there was other ways to handle the situation and to express anger. It was a very low-key discussion. I didn't make light of what had happened, but I told him I was glad he realized the danger of the situations. After the suspension, Daniel came to me before homeroom to say he was feeling frightened about coming to class that day. It was going to be his first meeting with Robert, and Robert sits right in front of him. And I said that I had already changed both their seats, and I told him, "Don't worry, I'll be watching." When they came in, I told him, "Each, you have a new seat," and then show them where to sit. There was no problem from that point on. As we can see from Sandy's story, Sandy reveals some important guidelines for dealing with aggressions in the classroom. So So let's examine her behavior more closely and consider the lessons to be learned. Number 1. Teachers should remain calm and in control to prevent the situation from escalating. She directed Daniel not to raise his hands against Robert. This can prevent the situation from escalating into a full-scale physical fight. Next, the teacher gave repetitive instructions to create a lull in the altercations, which will able to separate the two boys and move away from each other. Because Daniel was lying on the floor under the desk, it was easier for her to have Robert move away. In other cases, however, it could be advisable to remove the targets of the aggressions. You can direct them to go to a nearby teacher's classroom, or you could also have them move a far corner of the room, out of the aggression's line of sight. Number 2. Report to someone that there is a problem in the room and to summon help. Never send angry, aggressive student to the office alone. At the same time, identify students who can be trusted to get help for any sort of disruptions when the teacher isn't in the classroom. Number 3. While waiting for someone to provide assistance, speak privately and quietly with the student in an attempt to diffuse the aggressions. Acknowledge their anger and show your willingness to listen. It is critical that you resist the temptation to react normally and lash out on the students. You need to speak slowly and softly and to minimize the threat by not invading the student's space. And keeping your hands by your side, allow the student to relate facts and feelings, even if it involves profanity, and use active listening. Do not agree or argue. If the student's aggressions escalate despite your effort, it is best to move away unless you are trained in physical restraint technique. Number 4, give the students the opportunity to discuss what had happened. So to reinforce alternative ways to handle anger and to accept their apology, this could give the student a chance to re-establish a positive relationship. Number 5, after everything is resolved, scan the room to determine how the other students were feeling and what to do next. In this Sandy story, she decided that her best course of actions was to provide them with the basic facts such as Robert is in the office, Daniel is okay, and to begin the lesson. So let's get started on chemistry. She certainly did not want to explore with her class the reason behind Robert's aggressive actions. Sometimes your students might be upset and frightened. If the students are upset, you have to give them the opportunity to talk about what happened and to acknowledge their fear to avoid the students feeling all chained up inside for the next lesson.
Thank you, Fadila. Next, we will discuss on how to respond effectively to physical fight. Weston and Norbert was guided in 2015 that the fight is usually fast and quick. It is usually lasts less than 30 seconds, so we don't have enough time to think through the response. What can we do when we are on the scene and a fight erupts? So there are 5 practical tips for the teachers to use to effectively respond to physical fight. The first thing is you should do when experiencing and witnessing school violence is quickly assess the situations. Is this a verbal altercation? Is there any kind of physical contact? Is there anyone with a weapon? The second is to send a responsible student to help. Send it to the nearest teacher and to the principals or vice principals. It is easier and safer to get the situations under the control once other people are there to help. The third is tell the student to stop fighting. When students do not want to continue fighting, they will respond to short, clear and firm comment. If you know the combatants' names, use them. Fourth, disperse the other students. There is no need for an audience. If you do not want the onlookers to become part of the fray, so you can send your students to the library or some other safe place. Finally, do not interfere physically. Why? Because you can make the situations more complicated. Besides, there are many strong kids in schools and you may get seriously injured, especially during the girls' fight. In 2015, Weinstein and Novoseletsky states that the girls' fight was terrible. They may kick, pull your ears, and bite you when you are trying to stop them. But if there are 3 or 4 people to help, or if you have learned to physically restrain, or if the age, size, and numbers of the combatants are small, then you may interfere physically. Next, responding effectively to school-wide emergency. Fires, bullying, student brings weapons to the schools, and weather emergency may occur in the school. So what is the most effective way to respond to school-wide emergency? First, the schools need to develop an emergency plan before, during, and after the crisis so that the administrators, teachers, and staff, as well as parents, the community, and law enforcement are aware of and familiar with the emergency plan. For example, a parent saw a student showing other student a weapon in front of the school. What the parents can do is report the incidents to the school administration, and then the school administration is aware of the school site safety, which state that the students are not permitted to bring weapon to the schools. And the school administration, we call the police, and the school immediately went into the lockdown. The police searched every part of the school. So what happened to the students and teachers? Students and teachers remain in the classroom. They will sit on the floor away from the window during the research. The teacher need to make sure that the students are in a safe situation. After 2 hours, the police found a student with a weapon, a high-powered BB gun, and arrest him. So the next day, the teacher grade the students, and they need to make sure that the students are okay and calm with the incidents. If the students are not okay, bring the students to the counseling. As a result, the school management, teachers, parents, and law enforcement need to be familiar with the school emergency plan in order to direct the student calmly during the emergency. In conclusion, there are 4 factors that influence the violence among the students. In order to make the students feel safe and feel that they are part of the school community, there are 6 strategies that you can implement in the future. This can help to reduce the violence among the students.